All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel. It's Maddie here, and today we're going to be highlighting my top deck picks right now for the new ranked battle season. I say new, but it's been out for about a week now. This season is crazy. I don't know how many times I can say it. I really want to know your guys' opinions about Pokemon Pocket right now, the metagame, what things are like. My experience in this current season is, it's certainly a lot of variety, but, as we know, when you're playing on ranked battles, there's a handful of decks that people really just tend to play a little bit more. Whereas when you get into the tournament metagame at the end of the season, things tend to be a little bit different. People, like to play a little bit more variety. It's technically a smaller sample size, so those players might be a little bit more well-informed as to which decks actually do have a higher win rate. So there's a bit of a discrepancy, I would say, between, what the tournament meta looks like right now, at least, and then what you're likely going to be seeing in ranked, at least when you're in, Ultra Ball and maybe at the beginning of Master Ball. Now, I do want to stress that today I think we have 7 or 8 decks that I feel are the strongest picks right now, but keep in mind, if you're just looking to get to Master Ball rank, there's probably 20 plus decks that you could get there extremely easily. I think that there are so many strong decks currently in Pokemon Pocket, so if I don't mention something today, that doesn't mean it's not good. It just means that if I were to climb to top 1,000, which I don't have the time to do, quite frankly, but if I was in the process of doing that, these are the decks that I would be choosing to play, at least for the next few days going into this weekend. And talking about this weekend is, of course, PMPT number 36, so our online tournament for Pokemon Pocket, our weekly tournament series, the 36th one, I suppose, which is kind of crazy. It is going to be this Saturday, tomorrow, as I record this, June 20th at noon Eastern time. So link to register down in the description below. We should have a live stream this weekend as well, and it should be a lot of fun. But let's get into the decks, okay, guys? Let's do it. And don't forget, by the way, to like and subscribe. We're almost at 50,000 subscribers, which is crazy. Absolutely insane. Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is, of course, Sleep Altaria. Now, the thing about, the new version, Sleep 2.0 is what people are calling this, with, the new Hypnoblast Espeon. The thing about this deck list is that it's extremely popular and common in ranked battles, but even though it is technically the most played deck throughout the season, in tournament play so far throughout the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's only seen about a 7% play rate, which is extraordinarily low, by the way. That might be the most played deck has ever actually seen play. So even though it is technically the most played deck this season in tournaments, it's not really seeing much play at all, in comparison to maybe the most played decks of previous seasons. And I think the reason for that is because there are a lot of decks that do actually quite well into this deck list. And I think that's going to be sort of the central theme regarding a lot of the decks that we're going to talk about in today's video. Because I genuinely think that if you're playing in the ranked battle ladder right now, whether it's Ultra Ball or Master Ball tier, you're going to hit a lot of sleep, whether it's like Altaria sleep or just any real function of sleep. And it's a really strong strategy. However, if you're kind of building, if your deck is built to deal with it, then it's not going to be that bad of a matchup. And I think that's why not many people play it in tournaments, or not nearly as many people played in tournaments. So its win rate hasn't been that high in online play for tournaments. And in ranked, I don't know if it's something I would necessarily recommend if I'm grinding on ranked right now, but I know a lot of people are, so I just wanted to mention it. And this is just one example. This deck is playing double Mega Altaria, so it's playing 2 copies of every Pokemon in the deck list, 1 Copycat, 1 Pokeball, 1 Lissia, double Research, 1 Sabrina, 1 Cyrus, and 1 Training Area. So very standard build here, like no tool cards, no nothing. Just a very, very standard approach to Sleep Altaria, which is why I wanted to illustrate this deck list. Go ahead, play it if you want to, but trust me, you're just going to end up losing more than you kind of probably expect to lose. And if you do win, it's mainly just because of RNG and coin flips, which to me is never really that great of a strategy. But secondly, let's talk about what I actually think is potentially the #1 deck currently going into this weekend, which is ZOROARK. So in recent online tournaments, more people are playing ZOROARK than anything else. It really feels to be like the deck list that a lot of people are really gravitating towards right now. And I think for ranked, it's also a deck that translates very well. It's fast-paced, it's incredibly consistent, it's got a little bit of everything, which I really like about this deck. Again, it feels similarly to Manectric in a lot of the ways and reasons why Mega Manectric is really strong. However, ZOROARK is a 2-prize Pokemon, and we can incorporate things like Darkrai into it, and we still have Mega Absol. However, I always joke that Mega Absol loses you more games than it wins you, but it's okay. People still play Mega Absol. It's definitely not a terrible Pokemon. But because we're playing either just basic Pokemon or the 2-2 stage 1 lineup of ZOROARK EX, most of our deck, the prize math does sort of work out. It's one of the decks where You want your opponent to take 2 prizes and then go through either another 2 prize or 3 prize Pokemon, which quite frankly is actually one of the better ways to be playing Pokemon Pocket right now. Whether that's, Suicune doing the similar strategy, or I guess, I guess Meowscarada would be another one. But other than that, most decks are based around Mega Pokemon. I think Zoroark is extremely good. I just think that, even though this is a deck that doesn't necessarily have an extraordinary position into Sleep Altaria, I think that this is a deck that definitely can beat Sleep Altaria. We have one Pokemon Center Lady in here, but what I really think it comes down to is the fact that we have Rocky Helmet and Darkrai EX, which allows us to just deal enough damage to KO things like Igglybuff without actually having to, of course, attack with our active Pokemon, which is one of the biggest values of these dark type decks that play Darkrai EX. Dark Greninja used to do the same thing with Rocky Helmet, Chingling, and Darkrai. No matter what's in the active, we can put pressure on those baby Pokemon in the active, and it's actually a really strong strategy. We have Sabrina and Cyrus in here. We got double Pokeball, Research, and Copycat, so we're kind of covering all our bases here. We have a great selection of basic Pokemon. We have Bombardier for free retreat, Rocky Helmet for extra chip damage, Lucky Ice Pop for healing, PCL for healing as well, but also status healing. And then, of course, Field Blower is kind of that 20th card in the deck. I really do like Zoroark, and I think that, if you were to choose a deck to play on the ranked ladder right now, and you weren't necessarily worried about hard countering anything specifically, I think Zoroark is a really, really strong choice. There just doesn't feel to be that many relevant decks in the metagame that have a really, really strong position into Zoroark. And we'll talk about maybe why that is, but I really do recommend Zoroark. I think it's just such a great deck and a breath of fresh air, in a metagame where a lot of the decks seem to be a bit RNG dependent. Every deck is to some extent, but this is a deck that definitely feels straightforward, but also, fun to play. It feels flexible. There's some decisions to be made there. And in general, just one of my favorite decks in all of Pokemon Pocket. In all of history, I think Zoroark is just such a well-designed card for the entire kind of dark package that we have available to us. But next up, let's talk about Altaria. There's actually 3 Mega Altaria decks in this video because I still think Mega Altaria is such a good Pokemon for the ranked ladder, depending on how you want to play it. You have Sleep Altaria, which is really not what I recommend, but traditionally, before Sleep came out, what we had was 2 main versions of Altaria. You had a consistency version with Gourgeist, and then you had a high roll version with Greninja. And both do kind of incorporate Chingling, which is another big reason why I do think Mega Altaria is just one of the better cards and best Pokemon in ranked battles. People don't necessarily take it at face value, but if you were to play 100 ranked games with an Altaria deck playing double Chingling, you'd be shocked how many games you genuinely win because of Chingling. It's a really good card. Yes, there's certain strategies that kind of stop Chingling dead in its tracks, but those strategies and those really aggressive Pokemon that can just KO Chingling on turn 1, they can kind of get punished by Lucky Egg, right? So I still think Lucky Egg Chingling is extraordinarily good. We do see this combo in Dark Greninja as well, which I still believe is also a really valuable deck. It's very similar. I tend to just sort of lean towards the Altaria version just because I would rather play Mega Altaria than Mega Absol. I think it provides a bit more value in the current metagame. But yeah, no, I think Greninja, Chingling, Lucky Egg, it's just so good. It really is just so good. And I think that on the ranked ladder, this is a deck that really does kind of reward players for knowing what to do, right? In a weird way. It's a high roll deck, but it's becoming less and less high roll because of things like double Copycat, double Research, and Lucky Egg. We were even playing Lycia in here as well, which again makes sense with the 4 Pokemon with under 50 HP that are in the deck list. It's just got a little bit of everything. It really does. It feels like this deck has a tremendous amount of draw. It does a lot of damage. It's extremely consistent in terms of the end game board state that you want to get to, but it also has that kind of high roll potential, This is a deck that I really do feel strongly about, and I'm actually surprised that not more people are playing Greninja Altaria. But again, I do think it's tough because we have so many different ways that people are playing Mega Altaria, and quite frankly, they're all at the top of the metagame. My personal, recommendation is to not play Sleep, just because I really don't think it's as good as the other versions of Altaria. I think for tournament play, the Gourgeist, more consistent version, is a bit more popular, but Greninja Altaria consistently places at the top of tournament play and in the standings, mainly just because it has such a high upside, whereas maybe some of the other Altaria decks don't per se. I really like it. I really do. I think this deck kind of has everything going for it right now. We're only playing 1 Mega Altaria, but again, that's kind of fine, because the whole concept of this deck, and if we did have a couple extra spaces in the deck, maybe playing a copy of Mars with a second Altaria, maybe playing a Sabrina or something like that. There's a lot of cards that would be really crucial here, but the thing is, when you're playing, double Greninja, Rare Candy, and Chingling, like a really big aspect of that is just making sure we draw through our deck quickly enough so that once those Chinglings go down, we do have the Altaria and Greninja to kind of, give us an accurate, board position or a board position that allows us to win the game, right? A really, really strong deck. Don't sleep on Chingling, still one of the most valuable Pokemon in the entire game. And I think it's generally slept on, especially, again, in a ranked season where, if you are playing hundreds of games, like you're going to be shocked as to how many games just Chingling in general will win you. It's kind of crazy, honestly. Next up, let's talk about Grass. Grass is seeing less and less play as the season goes on, but I still wanted to talk about Sceptile because I think Grass in general with OGERPON, whether it is Meowscarada or Decidueye or Sceptile, I still feel strongly that Sceptile is the strongest of those decks. It has less of a defined matchup spread and just sort of a more general strength into like most things into the metagame. Fire is still seeing play. Like you're going to see the Charizards, you're going to see the Blazikens. That's the only thing that really scares me away from Sceptile. But, if you're not hitting Sleep Altaria, which you should have a decent matchup into because of OGERPON, you might be hitting some dark decks like HYDREIGON, which is certainly going to be popular this season in ZOROARK. Both of those decks are also really, really good. So I still think that Grass is fairly well positioned. It's just in a weird spot because in tournament play, we still see a decent amount of fire type decks. And I don't really know why. I think people are just sort of moving off of Sceptile. They're just sort of maybe a little bit done with this particular deck. It was perhaps one of the most, if not the most successful deck of the season. The other thing to mention as well is that like Lightning was very, very popular. Like this is a set that was sort of defined by the buffs to Magnezone and Miraidon, which are like Magnezone Miraidon is certainly one of the best decks in the entire game. I don't know how well I really feel about it into ranked battles though. Which is kind of an interesting thing. In tournament play, it's still extremely consistent. It's not seeing as much play as it did previously. I think it's the second or third most played archetype this season. If you wanted to play Magnezone, if you wanted to play Lightning, I'm sure that that's still a very strong option. But I have a weird kind of opinions about Lightning right now because there are several different strong options. And we do have a Lightning type deck as the weekly wild card this week. Again, I think that there's so many strong decks. It may seem odd that we're leaving off Magnezone and Miraidon in today's list, but I just don't know if it's something that I would necessarily pick. In fact, I would probably pick Sceptile and OGERPON before Magnezone and Miraidon, considering how much Sleep Altaria is seeing play and Bad Dreams Darkrai seeing play in general. You know what I mean? So I like Sceptile. Again, I think it's balanced. Like that's one of the things. This doesn't feel to me like it's, a huge standout right now, at least in the ranked season. But if you play it, you're probably not going to be disappointed. And again, it's going to feel nice to have a really solid matchup into those sleep decks, which I think is a really, really big deal. And it's also one of those things where this was a deck that was traditionally pretty well positioned into Oricorio. But the Lightning deck stopped playing Oricorio, and they started to just go a little bit more aggressive and in your face with things like Mega Manectric, right, and Zeraora, which, feels less good when you're a grass type deck, right, because it's all about, kind of being a bit more consistent on that turn 3, turn 4, mid to late game, just sort of being able to overcome your opponent. But if your opponent, isn't utilizing Oricorio and also kind of hoping to go to the late game, if they're just playing an in-your-face, fast-paced strategy, grass tends to feel a little bit less good, quite frankly. A lot of the grass Pokemon, really all of the grass Pokemon are stage 2 Pokemon, which inherently makes them a bit slower. And that's why I think things like Zoroark actually have a decent chance at beating Sceptile. But anyway, that's how I feel about Sceptile. I think it's still very, very good. And then next up is Suicune, yeah. Again, I really don't know how many people are playing Lightning. It's not something that I see a ton. And in tournament play, it's sort of balancing out amongst the other, types. At the beginning of the season, it was everywhere, but now it feels like there's definitely a wide variety of different, typings all present in the metagame. I still think Suicune is such a good deck. This might be the number 1 deck in the game. It's hard to say because it's not really seeing as much play as you might expect Suicune to play, at least in online tournament play. And I just think there are so many other popular strategies. Like Sleep is at the forefront of the metagame. Hydreigon is still very popular. People like to play the fire type decks. People like to play Lightning. So Suicune's just another deck. It's just another deck out there. I will say that Suicune is still kind of the default water type deck. So, if you have any affinity for the water typing, it's still going to be, I think, by far your best option. There's plenty of Greninja decks out there, so water Pokemon are seeing play, but in terms of like decks that are about water energy, Suicune is kind of it. It's literally what we have at the moment, and that might change. It might not also. It might just be Suicune water meta forever. I still think this is a great deck. It's interesting because not enough people play this Suicune to prompt a lot of people to play Protective Poncho. In fact, like you probably will never see Protective Poncho. So CHIEN-PAO just feels really, really good. It just feels as though it's doing exactly what it wants to all of the time. This deck is drawing double cards because of SUICUNE. It's extraordinarily tanky with double Giant Cape and starting planes. Flexible here, tons of draw support, PCL as well because sleep exists. Baxcalibur can deal with Oricorio quite easily. The deck just feels like it's got everything going for it. And in a metagame right now where a lot of decks feel like they're not hitting you for 150 plus damage, there's a couple of them, but the meta really shied away from one at KO strategies. I think that SUICUNE and CHIEN-PAO, again, also one of those decks that kind of focuses around having 2 prize Pokemon in the deck list, is extraordinarily strong. If we ever got like a water type basic mega Pokemon similar to Mega Absol, I would be absolutely terrified of SUICUNE, just because knowing that I have to not only go through the SUICUNE EX, but then go through like a basic mega on the bench would be absolutely ridiculous. And I'm just really glad that we don't have something like that for the water type, because it would pair too well with SUICUNE. For now, we have CHIEN-PAO, but again, before CHIEN-PAO was Greninja and the whole Greninja lineup. I think Baxcalibur and the energy support just is sort of the future for SUICUNE, because not only does it kind of allow you to set up that second Pokemon extremely consistently, but it also allows you to get SUICUNE up and running on turn 2 if you go first, on your second turn going first, which is not something SUICUNE was ever able to do. And just that ability alone makes, Baxcalibur super good. So I honestly think SUICUNE's extremely well positioned moving into the future. I still think it's one of the best cards in the game. And just the support package around it right now is still strong, but if anything else comes out in future sets, like, it's going to be crazy. It's going to get out of control. So I still recommend SUICUNE. But next up here is Mega Altaria and Gourgeist. This is probably the least popular version of Altaria. Maybe though, I think, I don't know, maybe more people are playing this than Greninja Altaria, although recently in tournaments, I would say that Greninja Altaria is definitely seen a bit more success in terms of placements. And I do feel a little bit better about it, especially with Lucky Egg and Ranked. Like, you just feel like you have more opportunities to get into your like completed board state. This is a deck that doesn't have as high of an overall upside. It just has so many options and it's super hyper consistent, right? And the other thing about this particular Altaria deck is that you never worry about Oricorio. And even though less and less people are playing Oricorio, especially on the ranked ladder, it is nice to never really have to worry about it. And Gourgeist is going to be exceptionally strong. Just really any matchup that's like fighting type as well. Fighting is also something that, probably not many people are playing. Great Tusk is my deck this season, but this to me went from being a lightning type season and quickly shifting towards a psychic type based season, in a weird way. Even though we got, Koraidon and Miraidon, it really feels like the psychic type decks with Sleep and Gourgeist and Greninja Altaria, they're just at the forefront of the metagame. And even all of those like weird decks that people are playing with Giratina and Mimikyu and Indeedee, Psychic to me is the best deck, best type in the game. If it's not Psychic, it's probably Dark, to be honest. Like, those are the best types, just in terms of like the variety and the overall high upside that we have. So I like Gourgeist. Again, if you wanted to play a deck that just felt really good every game, sometimes the thing is, I always say this, like, how would you rather lose games, right? When you're grinding on the ranked ladder, would you rather lose games by, just sort of your opponent's deck being stronger than yours? Or would you rather lose games by your opponent just sort of draws the cards and you don't draw the cards, right? Would you rather have a chance to win always, or half the time never have a chance to win, but the other half always almost have a guaranteed chance to win? You know what I mean? It just sort of depends on what you kind of vibe with and how you like to play the ranked ladder. This is a deck that I think some people in tournament play shy away from to some extent, because they know that, like, even though their deck's super consistent, they're just going to hard lose to other strategies that if they do achieve the board state that they want to, even though it's less consistently done, they're going to be strong enough to just beat you, even with your completed board state, So are you more of a consistency deck or a high roll deck? The thing about Altaria is you can play it whatever way you want. You could play just pure RNG slop with Sleep. You could play high roll with Greninja, or you could play consistency with Gourgeist and always, feel like you're in it. And honestly, like, that's really what the season comes down to. It's so weird to me. I just think that they've given us so many strong psychic type cards. Not only that, but like Mega Altaria is such an easy to play Pokemon in any strategy that, like, moving forward, like, I just don't know what could possibly replace Mega Altaria. It's 190 HP and 130 damage, like, just guaranteed. It's just super easy. It's a stage 1 Pokemon. It's got a lot of HP, only 2 energy attack cost, which is like a sweet spot. It's crazy to me that basically, even though we do have other strong megas, like Manectric is a good example of that, it hasn't been anything else released in terms of mega Pokemon that just sort of stacks up to Mega Altaria in a weird way. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. This is Gourgeist Altaria deck that I definitely still recommend for ranked. And then lastly here, before the weekly wild card, is HYDREIGON, right? I just wanted to talk about HYDREIGON because I think that it's still one of the more popular decks, especially on the ranked ladder. Like, I think as you get higher up, people just value HYDREIGON again for the same reasons that you don't really want to have to worry too much about, metagaming and playing a deck that is good into other decks that you might be playing. Maybe you're playing a variety of matchups. Who knows? At the end of the day, a HYDREIGON is going to be able to do exactly what it wants to do. And if it does do exactly what it wants to do, it's probably got a good chance to win. It's just a general high roll deck. A big upside to HYDREIGON, and why I always recommend it for ranked, is that it doesn't really require you to know exactly what's going on in the metagame, right? To be honest, like, it doesn't matter what your opponent's doing, ever. It doesn't matter what they're playing. It doesn't matter what's going on. We're just going to try to get into HYDREIGON as early as possible and then attack with it until they go down. And then once HYDREIGONs go down, we go into ABSOL, and then hopefully we win. Like, there's no other concept here. There's only one line with this deck. There are some times where you lead ABSOL and you're like, if I want, maybe I went second, like, should I just commit to it? Like, is that the right choice? Should I, maybe, play this copycat here? Should I attach this Rocky helmet here? Like, the general stuff. Should I play this Sabrina early? Should I hold on to it? There's stuff like that for sure. But in terms of like knowing what you have available to you and knowing what you're going to use at any given moment, it's a lot more straightforward. Like, even just like ZOROARK, which is similar, but you throw a DARKRAI right into the mix, like it really does change things up a good bit. And it makes that deck feel a little bit less linear. This is, in my mind, still one of the more linear decks in the entire game. And Suicune's the same way to an extent. Like, Suicune also feels linear, which is totally fine. It's like honestly an upside. Like, if your deck doesn't have a lot of different pockets and paths, it's honestly an advantage for ranked, just because you don't have to worry about that, and you can kind of autopilot games. And HYDREIGON to me has been one of the best like autopilot decks for a very long time. However, a lot of people are just playing sleep. I don't know. Maybe the thing is, as well, is like the entertainment factor. Like, maybe playing sleep is just fun to people because you flip coins. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. It helps you kind of separate yourself from like, oh, I lost because I misplayed. You're like, oh, I lost because I just, my opponent flipped heads or whatever. Maybe that's, I don't know. Maybe people prefer that. HYDREIGON's just like that, but it's like, oh, I didn't draw rare candy. You know what I mean? Like, that's how you lose with HYDREIGON. Anyway. I still think this is a really, really strong deck. So, and I probably always will. Like, I just don't know if the metagame will really completely shift away from HYDREIGON. There's been times where this deck has been heavily metagamed and counter-meted. I just don't think that this is really the time where that's happening. It doesn't matter. It just does not matter what you're going up against. Like, it just feels like, you're probably doing okay if you're playing HYDREIGON, right? So that's the upside. But anyway, lastly, let's get into this weekly wildcard here, guys, which is going to be this week. The weekly wildcard is Greninja Manectric. That's right. So I had a tournament like today. I was like kind of reviewing some of the decks. I wanted to find a weekly wild card, and I did find this. And you know what? I know it's exactly the same as the Altaria deck, but it's Manectric. And to be honest with you, I actually do kind of like this. I do like it for the exact same reason why Altaria is strong. Mega Manectric is also a bit strong. The cool thing about Mega Manectric in replacement of Altaria in this Greninja Chingling strategy is that, when you're playing Altaria, like, you really don't want the Swablu in the active. You really kind of rely on leading Chingling, right? And then going into Altaria later. The cool thing about Electrike and Manectric is that you feel like you're probably totally fine if you lead with Electrike, because you're like, well, that's fine. I'll just go into Manectric turn 2. I don't necessarily need to bench these Chinglings. And then from there, I just sort of hope I can draw into my Greninjas and I just sort of do my thing. So I don't know if this is better than Altaria. Like, in a general sense, I don't know if Manectric is better than Mega Altaria. Mega Manectric does definitely like to benefit from, having that fast-paced type of deck, like with ZOROARK, like we've seen in the other Turbo Manectric decks. Or sometimes people will play it with Oricorio. To me, it's like, why not, right? The Greninja Chingling stuff can be played in literally any deck. And to me, when I was talking about Lightning before, it just doesn't really feel like a late game deck that I have a ton of confidence in. And I know Miraidon is certainly strong, but when I'm playing Magnezone, it's almost like, okay, like, would I rather play Magnezone or play like one of these other decks right now, at least on the ranked ladder, that are also late game decks that I feel a little bit more confidently in the late game? It's a weird thing. Definitely a weird concept. But the thing with Mega Manectric is that it functions almost exactly the same as Altaria in that sense that, like, it'll live an attack most likely and then 2-hit KO anything, right? So it's just, that's how I kind of feel about it. Manectric also does have free retreat where Altaria doesn't, right? So, in those games where if you go first and you do lead Electrike, you're like, well, I don't want to leave this thing in the active because I'm going to get attacked on my opponent's second turn. Well, then I'll just sort of evolve, free retreat into my Chingling, and then get my Chingling locked down and buy me maybe an extra turn or whatnot, right? So that's a big advantage, is the free retreat with Mega Manectric rather. And Altaria doesn't have the free retreat, right? So if you lead Swablu, you got to attach, you got to retreat, you got to maybe put them asleep or something. It can be a little bit awkward. Manectric with that free retreat, I think, is a really big deal here, and I think it actually works pretty nicely, to be fair, with Chingling. And, you know, once you take that 1 KO, right, with Manectric, and you go to 110 damage, and you have the Greninjas on the backline supporting you, like, it's a ton of damage. It really is. So I like this deck. To me, it's a cool version of Manectric. It's something a little bit different. I think the player playing this was like 4-0 at a tournament today as I record this, so I wanted to give them a shout out. I forget the name of the player for sure. I forget. You'll know exactly who this is because this is not a deck that most people have played. But they're playing in a tournament today and they're doing well. So again, shout out to them. I thought it was perfect for the weekly wild card. And I think it just sort of illustrates again, you know, there's certain core packages that you can play in ranked. And right now, I actually feel extremely confident about the Chingling Greninja stuff. I just think that it's honestly going to be really, really good. And I wish it wasn't so good in a sense, like, because it's super, like, you can just play it with whatever. But people are doing that with Sleep. You know, there's Sleep Lucario, there's Sleep Altaria, there's Sleep this, that. Honestly, I think Greninja Chingling is a deck that I feel really, really good about. It's a core package that I feel really good about. So anyway, that's the weekly wildcard this week. Comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of this current season. I know the tournament metagame in the first 2 weeks of the season was very fun. It was refreshing. It was all over the place. But I think once people got into ranked, they probably realized, well, some of these decks are actually very, very popular, and I don't necessarily love playing it very much. I've been seeing a ton of Sleep, and that's kind of what I based around this video around. But comment down below, what decks are you seeing the most of? Because it's always interesting. Like, I read through all of the comments, so share your experience about ranked, what decks you've been playing. To be honest, like I said, if you're at Ultra Ball or early Master Ball, I'm sure that you have a great win rate playing almost anything. There's so many strong decks in the game right now. These are just the things that I would pick, and if it were up to me. So don't feel bad if I didn't mention a deck that you've been playing and doing well with, because I'm really not surprised by it. But anyway, let's wrap up the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Peace out. We'll see you guys later. Also, don't forget to register for PMPT number 36 tomorrow at noontime. Link to register down in the description below. All right, guys. Peace out. Have a good one. Bye.